The Embroidered Sunset by Joan Aiken, 10. Did and I used to do this for each other, Aunt Fennel said comfortably. When you're old, you know, dearie, it gets harder and harder to reach your feet. That does feel nice. It must be frightful, said Lucy, trying to imagine the helplessness of not being able to cut one's own toenails. She carefully pumiced the corn, anointed it from a mysterious little bottle of dark green celandine lotion, and laid in place the small cotton wool shield with a hole in the middle. My corns have never bothered me, though, Aunt Fennel went on, but Dills used to give her a lot of trouble, especially in the summer when we did the teas. Did you do a lot, Aunt Fennel? Quite a few at weekends, dearie. We had a teas sign down at the bottom of the beck, and of a Saturday or Sunday we'd have a dozen or two, quite often Dills baking was so good, you see. People got to know and came back. That was how that other one managed to come to the place. Lucy sat back on her heels and regarded the old lady with interest, but she did not ask any questions. During the 10 days since she had come to Wildfell Hall, Aunt Fennel, apparently feeling more secure in the large, well-appointed place, had been slightly less unforthcoming about that other one. But questions were still liable to make her close up and lose confidence. He came along pretending to be one of those foreign tourists, wearing a little hat with a feather and dark glasses and foreign-type shoes, and accent. That was before I got so deaf, of course, she broke off to say quickly. Lucy waited. Dill used to carry the teas. We had 3 or 4 little tables in the parlour. Didn't always see the people, but I went in that time with more hot water, and I saw him sitting by himself. I know that face. I thought that he's changed, as a beard and glasses, which he never used. But he's no foreigner. Even before he spoke, I was certain in my mind, because there were quick footsteps outside the door. Postman's been. There's a couple of letters for you, Miss Culpepper, Mrs. Marsham said, coming in. Oh, is the mail strike ended then? Yes, it was mentioned last night on the TV news. I suppose it'll take them at least 6 weeks to get all the backlog sorted. Lucy studied her letters with curiosity. Who would have written to her? One was typed with a York postmark, Aunt Fennel's bank, possibly. It looked uninteresting. The other, she saw with a leap of the heart, came from Colsham, Surrey, and was addressed to her in an unusually beautiful handwriting, shapely and chiseled, if a little shaky. She had an impulse to hoard it until she was alone. Here are your slippers, Aunt Fennel. I'll just pour away the water and tidy up. She whisked up the bath mat, basin, nail scissors, towel, and file. Mrs. Marsham was putting clean linen into a large closet in the hallway. Oh, by the way, Lucy asked her, have you heard when Nora's likely to be coming up? Nora? Probably the end of the week. Why? Well, Lucy was slightly surprised. As my stay here was only temporary, to tide you through the measles in Nora's absence, and as the epidemic's on the wane, and you've got Fiona now too, I imagined you wouldn't want me much longer. The matron seemed equally surprised. Please don't feel you have to rush off, Miss Culpepper. Your work is quite satisfactory. I'll say it is, thought Lucy, 14 hours hard every day. And I'm sure we don't want to lose you. If you'd like to stay a while longer, until you're quite sure that your aunt is happily settled. That's very kind of you, Lucy said deadpan, and quite a different tone from what you sang when the notion was first raised. Flattering, of course, but let's be honest. I'm not so dear to you as all that. What's the game now? Anyway, think it over, Mrs. Marsham said, smiling, the tight smile which carved her thin cheeks into diagonal folds. To be candid, I'd rather lose Mrs. Fraser than you. She's inclined to be just a little bit feather-brained. Fraser, it had turned out, was Fiona's real name. The Mrs. was a courtesy appellation added by Mrs. Marsham, and ungratefully received. Carados, Fiona now rejected with scorn, saying it reminded her of a part of her life she proposed to forget without delay. Oh, well, if you're sure, Lucy said vaguely. The vague tone covered an internal conflict. She felt a desperate urge to get away, to go south and make a start on her studies with Benevek. On her own life, Aunt Fennel seemed comfortable, well cared for, happy as a clam. But was this really a suitable place in which to leave her? If only one could be sure. You forgot my stockings, dearie. Aunt Fennel's tone was faintly martyred when Lucy returned to her. She put out a foot like a child, Lucy thought, making a bid for attention. The instant it senses the adult's interest has moved elsewhere. I'm so sorry, Aunt Fen. Look, here they are, nice and warm from the radiator. Who are your letters from, dearie? I haven't read them yet, Lucy said defensively. Don't you want to look at them? It would be unkind to repulse this gentle persistence. I think one's from Benedict, the man who's going to teach me the piano. Aunt Fennel remained silent. It was one of her expressive silences. She had made it plain that she did not think highly of Lucy's choice of career, but perhaps this was just a rationalization of an innocent possessiveness, a wish not to lose her newly acquired niece just yet. The other one? I don't know. It's from York. I might as well look, I suppose. She pulled the envelope from her pocket, carefully reserving Benedict's for future reading. It's from someone staying at the Royal Turpin Hotel. Good grief, it's from Uncle Wilby. Whoever would have thought he'd find time to come to England? Has he come to see why I haven't secured any pictures yet, she wondered. Does he really set so much store by them? Or is he determined to establish Aunt Fennel's status as an impostor once and for all? Whatever he's come for, I bet he's up to no good. Want to hear what it says? She read along, eyes shooting ahead, editing and abridging. All neatly typed. He must have hired a secretary. Oh, I see. He says he has Russ along. Dear Lucy, I got your letter. I do not think Aptley Old Hall sounds in the least a good place in which to leave her. These private homes are often not at all well run. In any case, it is impossible to tell how a place so recently opened may turn out. Obliged to visit England on business, contracting firms in this part of the country. Think it best if you bring your great aunt over to York to see me. Discuss what to do with her. As if you were a parcel, said Lucy indignantly. You'll have to tell him where he gets off. Interfering so-and-so. He's not going to shift you out of here unless you want... You like this place, don't you? She was amused to notice her sympathies had switched round and were now strongly partisan in favour of Mrs. Marsham and her smoothly run establishment. Ross McClarity is with me. Suggest you ring and fix a time to come. Lucy suppressed the final paragraph, which was an angry inquiry as to why she had not made more progress in acquiring Aunt Fennel's pictures, what she had done with the money given her for that purpose, why the matter of identity had not been cleared up, and in general, what the hell was going on. Signed Uncle W. Typical, said Lucy. She was tempted to tear up the letter and throw it away, but he had better be phoned at least. Do you want to go and see him, Aunt Fennel? Feel like a trip to York? Maybe he'll give us a champagne lunch. Aunt Fennel had been quite silent since Lucy opened the letter. It was as if her mind were preoccupied very much elsewhere, and she hardly seemed to be attending. Now she said absently, See him? No, I don't want to see him, dearie. I'm quite happy here. I think this is a very nice place. You don't feel like an outing to York? A bit of shopping? No, thank you, dearie. I never did think much of the shops in York. Okay, I'll tell him to go take a long walk up a short pier. If he wants to see you, he can come here. I don't want to see him at all, dearie. Who would? Lucy agreed. But one might as well be civil. I don't suppose he'll come, unless the lust for pictures fetches him over, she thought. Aunt Fennel's expression was so distant and withdrawn. She mumbled her lips together, and her eyes had the apprehensive look she had begun to lose since coming to Wildfell Hall. You can see him if he comes, dearie. I shan't. But you won't let him move me away from here, will you? Promise? Her thin fingers tightly gripped Lucy's. Miserable little bastard, Lucy thought, putting the poor old dear in such a fright again. He shan't upset her any more if I can help it. Don't worry, she said. He needn't see you if you don't want. You can always retire to bed with a cold. That's a nobby idea. In fact, I don't feel too well now. Hearing from him has upset me. I think I'll have a little lie down now. Yes, you do that. Lucy helped the old lady into bed, crossly dislodging the repellent baby brother, who was asleep on the knitted patchwork. He yawned, stretched his gross body, and jumped out onto the portico. I do wonder if Taffy Puss was really killed by a fox, Aunt Fennel murmured, looking after him. Didn't you say you saw a cat when you went to Highbeck? Yes, but surely it couldn't have been your Taffy. You said Colonel Linton buried him. This one was probably a stray. Suppose Colonel Linton was mistaken. That doesn't seem likely. Now don't you worry your head about that. Have a nice nap. I'll call you in plenty of time for supper. Troubled by the old lady's rambling tone and dreamy vacant air, she ran down to help Fiona prepare carrots for the evening meal. What's up? You look like Madame Dufault sharpening the guillotine. Just thinking about my uncle. He's arrived in England and making hell. Wants to know why I haven't gotten any pictures yet. Just let him try getting them out of the good people of Atley. Fiona said cheerfully. Then he'll know. By the way, when I was exercising my powers of persuasion on Mrs. Thorpe unsuccessfully, I'm afraid, I had an interesting piece of gossip about Mrs. Marsham's son. She glanced toward the door. Oh, yes. Lucy was inattentive, longing to get away and read her letter. He started training as a doctor, it seems, but got into trouble over some backstreet abortion affair in Birmingham and had to give up. Now he has this osteopath's practice, which, according to Mrs. T, is a highly shady business. She knows someone who has a friend, who has a cousin, who has a neighbour, who has a daughter who's no better than she should be, who went to him for you-know-what. First-hand evidence, as you can see. Lucy stopped peeling. That's a worry, she said slowly. I wonder if it's on account of Harold that I've had this uneasy feeling about this place. That Adnan warned me off it. He'd know about a thing like that. Am I right to leave Aunt Fennel here? Mrs. Twite did say that none of this had anything to do with Mrs. Marsham. She's as honest as a Janek and hard-working as a body as you can hope to find. Fiona, said Lucy abruptly, I suppose you wouldn't consider looking Aunt Fennel. How do you mean, ducks? Look after her when? Back at her own cottage. Is she going to be persuaded to go? It's a dear little place. A dear haunted little place, Lucy thought. But Fiona was supremely unimaginative. If she did encounter a manifestation of the supernatural, she would probably kick its shins and deal it a brisk blow with a hockey stick. You could have your baby with you there. It would be great. Well, I must say I wouldn't mind, Fiona said slowly. Your Aunt Fennel's a honey and a darling. I'd get along all right with her. You see, it wouldn't cost any more than keeping her here, less probably. And if she's moved back to Highbeck, old Colonel Linton could be persuaded to part with his pictures. The main difficulty may be persuading Aunt Fennel herself to agree. But you're a big, tough girl, and she likes you. If she felt she'd be safe with you, I'll think about it, said Fiona. Really, it's not a bad notion. I don't think, darling, Mrs. M and I are going to hit it off much longer now measles are past their prime. The carrots were done. There was only the fish to steam. Lucy escaped for 5 minutes and ran across to the stable yard where little PHO was parked. Sitting in the driver's seat, she pulled Benedict's letter from her jeans pocket. There would just be light enough to read it. The envelope was large, square, and white. There should be a seal on the back, she thought, turning it over with recollections of Liette. I ought to fetch my embroidery scissors and snip round it, carefully preserving it to put under my pillow. Pity people don't use them now. There was no seal, but there was something else which did catch her eye. A large ginger cat's hair sticking out from under the sealed flap. Odd, very odd. Lucy thought it looked exactly like one of the revolting baby brother's hairs. But how would it get under the flap? She gave it a tweak. The hair stayed firmly in place. There were always cat hairs on Lucy's jeans because baby brother, whether welcome or unwelcome, rubbed vigorously against any human leg he encountered and shed fur in handfuls. Lucy found a hair on her trouser leg and compared it with the one under the envelope flap. They seemed identical. Has that goddamn Mrs. Marsham been reading my mail? The idea made her burn with fury, but it seemed the only explanation. She wished she still had Wilby's envelope to recheck and see whether that too had been tampered with, but unfortunately she had tossed it into the kitchen stove. At last, with a feeling as if greasy fingers were on her arm, jeering voices whispering behind her back, she opened the envelope, prizing it up with a pencil so that the cat's hair remained gummed to the flap. And we will pause there.